Welcome to the Cozy Storytime, your peaceful space to unwind and relax. Before we start, make sure to subscribe and like the video for more cozy stories every night. So, where are you watching it from? And what are you doing right now? I hope you enjoyed this story. In the quiet halls of Hogwarts, where ancient secrets whisper through the stone walls, a hidden path lies waiting to be discovered. Beneath the flickering candlelight and the distant echoes of enchanted footsteps, a mystery unfolds, a journey into the forgotten corners of magic itself. Tonight, let yourself drift into a world where shadows hold untold stories, where enchanted maps lead to the unknown, and where four daring souls step beyond the boundaries of legend. Feel the warmth of a quiet night, the hush of secrecy, the anticipation of adventure. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the magic guide you. The road to the hidden chamber begins now. The Hogwarts library had always been a place of mystery, but tonight it felt different. The air smelled of old parchment and candle wax, the dim glow of enchanted lanterns casting flickering shadows across the endless rows of towering bookshelves. It was well past curfew, but that had never stopped me before. I had a knack for slipping past Filch and his wretched cat, Mrs. Norris, and tonight was no different. I wasn't even looking for trouble. I had only meant to finish my charms essay, but fate had other plans. As I reached for an old, dust-covered tome on advanced spellwork, something unexpected happened. A piece of parchment, so fragile it looked like it might disintegrate at the slightest touch, slipped from between the book's brittle pages and floated to the floor. Curious, I knelt down and carefully picked it up. It was aged, the edges frayed and uneven, but the ink was still visible. As I unfolded it, my breath caught in my throat. It was a map. Not just any map, though. This wasn't the Marauder's map that Harry and his friends often used to sneak around Hogwarts. No, this was something else entirely. The corridors and staircases it displayed were unlike anything I had ever seen before. Some of them weren't even supposed to exist. At the very center of the parchment, written in elegant but fading script, were the words, "The Hidden Chamber of Sorcery, for those bold enough to seek it." I stared at it, my mind racing. The Hidden Chamber of Sorcery? I had never heard of it before. Hogwarts was full of secret rooms and passageways, but this was something different. The Marauder's map had never shown anything about a place like this. That could only mean one thing: someone had gone to great lengths to keep it a secret. I felt a sudden chill, as if the castle itself was warning me not to pursue this. But, of course, that only made me more determined. I needed a second opinion. There was only one person I knew who would be just as intrigued by this as I was, Ginny Weasley. Slipping through the hallways of the castle undetected was no small feat, especially at night. The suits of armor creaked ominously, and the portraits whispered to one another as I passed. I held my breath every time I heard footsteps, half expecting Filch or Snape to appear around the next corner. But luck was on my side. By the time I reached the Gryffindor common room, the fire had burned low, casting long, wavering shadows against the stone walls. Most students had gone to bed, but Ginny was still up, curled in one of the oversized armchairs, scribbling furiously in a notebook. She looked up when she heard me enter, raising an eyebrow. "You're out late," she said. "Up to something?" I smirked. "You could say that." She set her quill down, stretching. "All right, let's hear it." What did you find this time?" I pulled out the map and handed it to her. She took it carefully, her eyes scanning the lines and markings with growing interest. When she reached the center and read the words aloud, her face lit up with excitement. "The Hidden Chamber of Sorcery," she murmured. "How have we never heard of this before?" "Exactly," I said, leaning forward. "If this place is real, why has no one found it? Or if they have, why isn't it in any of the books?" Ginny traced a finger over the map, her brow furrowed in thought. Maybe someone wanted to make sure no one ever found it again. That was a chilling thought. She glanced up at me, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "So, when are we going to look for it?" I grinned. "I was hoping you'd say that." We spent the next hour studying the map, comparing it to what we already knew about Hogwarts' layout. The more we looked at it, the more confusing it became. The map seemed to show corridors that connected in impossible ways, staircases that led to nowhere, and rooms that vanished entirely. One thing was clear, though: the entrance to the hidden chamber was somewhere on the 7th floor. "I think it's near the gargoyle statue," Ginny said, tapping a point on the map. "The one that never seems to move, even though all the other statues shift around from time to time." I nodded. "That makes sense. That statue has always seemed a bit odd. If there's a secret entrance, that would be the perfect place to hide it." Ginny folded the map carefully, tucking it inside her robe. "Tomorrow night, then?" I hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Tomorrow night. Excitement buzzed between us. This was bigger than sneaking into the kitchens for a late-night snack or using extendable ears to eavesdrop on professors. This was something ancient, something forgotten, and we were going to find it. As I climbed into bed later that night, I found it hard to sleep. My mind kept returning to the map, to the cryptic words written at its center. "For those bold enough to seek it." I couldn't help but wonder, what exactly were we about to uncover? And more importantly, were we ready for it? The next night arrived with an air of anticipation. The moment dinner ended, I could feel the weight of our plan pressing down on me, making my heart pound with excitement and just a hint of nervousness. I caught Ginny's gaze across the Gryffindor table, and she gave me the smallest of nods. It was time. We waited until most of the students had left the common room for their dormitories. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. A few students still lingered, some finishing homework, others deep in conversation, but none were paying attention to us. Ginny stood up first, stretching dramatically. "I think I'll turn in early tonight," she announced casually. I stifled a grin and did the same. "Yeah, me too." No one questioned us. It was a perfect, ordinary evening, except for the fact that we were about to sneak into uncharted territory within Hogwarts. We climbed the stairs to the dormitories, but stopped just before reaching the landing. From there, we took a sharp turn and slipped through the hidden back passage that led to the castle corridors. The walls felt colder, the torches dimmer. The castle at night was a different place, full of eerie whispers, shifting shadows, and the occasional, unsettling creak of moving staircases. Ginny pulled the enchanted parchment from her robes and unrolled it. "7th floor," she whispered. "Near the gargoyle statue." I nodded, and we pressed forward, moving as silently as possible. The journey was slow and careful. We ducked behind statues whenever we heard the faint sound of footsteps. A few times, we thought we heard Filch's grumbling voice echoing through the halls, but it never got close enough to be a real threat. Eventually, after weaving through several corridors and secret shortcuts, we reached the 7th floor. There, standing against the wall like an ancient guardian, was the gargoyle statue. I had passed by this spot countless times over the years, never once thinking twice about it. The statue was large and imposing, its stone features worn with age. It stood hunched over, its wings partially unfurled, its expression frozen in a perpetual scowl. Unlike most of Hogwarts' enchanted statues, this one had never moved, never spoken. It had always just been there. Ginny ran a hand over the rough stone. If this is the entrance, how do we open it? I examined the map again. There was no clear indication of how to activate the door. No secret phrase, no lever, nothing. We must be missing something, I muttered. It wouldn't be hidden as well without some kind of trick. Ginny took a step back, squinting at the statue. What if we try a spell? Like what? She thought for a moment. Then, raising her wand, she pointed it at the gargoyle and whispered, Alhambra. Nothing happened. I wasn't surprised. If unlocking a secret chamber in Hogwarts was as simple as a basic unlocking spell, someone would have found it long ago. Maybe it needs a password, I suggested. Most of the secret entrances in the castle do. Ginny pursed her lips, thinking. Then she turned back to the statue and spoke clearly, hidden chamber of sorcery. Silence. I tried. Let us in. Nothing. Ginny frowned. Well, that's... Before she could finish her sentence, a deep, grinding noise echoed through the corridor. The gargoyle's stone wings twitched, just slightly, dislodging bits of dust. Then, to our utter amazement, its mouth moved. Who seeks the knowledge of the forgotten? Ginny and I exchanged startled glances. The voice was deep and ancient, as if it hadn't spoken in centuries. My throat felt dry. We do, I managed to say. The gargoyle's eyes, which had previously been lifeless stone, flickered with a faint blue glow. Knowledge comes at a cost. Are you willing to pay the price? Ginny hesitated, but I found myself answering almost instinctively. Yes. Another rumbling sound filled the hallway. The gargoyle's body shifted, its wings folding inward. The stone at its base trembled, then began to split apart. Before our eyes, a hidden door materialized within the wall, its frame outlined by a dim, golden light. It wasn't a normal door, it looked like it had been sculpted directly from the castle itself, the same aged stone blending seamlessly into the rest of the corridor. We stood frozen for a moment. Then Ginny whispered, That's definitely not supposed to be there. I took a shaky breath. Guess that means we're going in. Ginny grinned. I thought you'd never say that. I reached for the door handle. The metal was ice cold beneath my fingers. With a deep breath, I turned it. The door swung open silently, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. A cold gust of air rushed past us, carrying the scent of damp stone and something else, something old, something forgotten. Ginny stepped closer, peering down. No torches. No light. I lifted my wand. Lumos. A small, glowing orb of light appeared at the tip, illuminating the top steps of the staircase. The stone was uneven, worn down by time. There were strange markings along the walls, symbols that I didn't recognize. I swallowed hard. Last chance to turn back. Ginny shot me a playful smirk. Not a chance. With that, she took the first step down. I followed immediately, the door closing behind us with an eerie finality. The descent felt endless. The deeper we went, the colder it became. Our footsteps echoed strangely, the sound distorted as if the walls were pressing in on us. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we reached the bottom. The staircase opened into a vast chamber. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. The walls were covered in ancient runes, glowing faintly with a pulsing light. Shelves lined the edges of the room, filled with strange artifacts, some humming softly, others emitting a faint, ghostly glow. In the center of the chamber stood a massive, ornate pedestal. Upon it rested an object covered in a thick, black cloth. Ginny took a cautious step forward. "What is this place?" I had no answer. A shiver ran down my spine as I looked around. Something about this place felt alive, as if it was watching us. Then, as we took another step forward, the door behind us vanished. We were trapped. And in that moment, I realized this was only the beginning. The moment the door vanished behind us, the chamber grew colder. The flickering glow from the runes on the walls cast shifting shadows, making it feel like the room was alive, breathing, waiting. A silent weight pressed down on my chest, the unmistakable feeling that we had just crossed into a place where we didn't belong. Ginny slowly turned in a circle, her fingers tightening around her wand. "Okay," she said, her voice low but steady. "That's unsettling." Understatement of the year. I raised my wand higher, letting the Lumos spell illuminate more of the chamber. The shelves lining the walls were filled with objects that pulsed with an eerie energy, artifacts of different shapes and sizes, some looking no more dangerous than an old book, while others glowed with an ominous light. But my eyes kept drifting back to the pedestal in the center. The cloth covering the object there was deep black, woven with golden embroidery in a language I didn't recognize. Something about it called to me, a whisper at the back of my mind, urging me to reach out, to pull the fabric away and see what lay beneath. Ginny noticed my gaze. "Do you feel that?" she murmured. I nodded. The pull was almost magnetic. "We should probably not touch." Before she could finish, a whisper slithered through the room. Not a normal whisper. It wasn't the rustling of robes or the soft echo of our own movements. It was something else. Multiple voices, layered on top of each other, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. The words were indistinct, slipping through my ears like mist, but I knew one thing for certain: they were coming from the shelves. Ginny and I instinctively took a step back, wands raised. The artifacts were whispering. One object in particular caught my attention, a small, silver locket, its surface etched with swirling patterns. It lay in an open wooden box, and unlike the others, it wasn't glowing or pulsing. It just sat there, silent, unmoving. But its whisper was the loudest of them all. I could almost hear my name in the voices. Ginny shivered. "I do not like this." I swallowed hard. "Agreed." She motioned toward the pedestal. You think whatever's under that cloth is causing this? I wasn't sure. The entire chamber felt charged with energy, but there was something undeniably powerful about the object in the center. Ginny took a step closer, her hand hovering over the fabric. She didn't get to finish. The whispering suddenly rose into a scream. A gust of freezing wind blasted through the chamber, extinguishing my Lumos spell instantly. The room was plunged into darkness, but the runes on the walls flared to life, their glow pulsating erratically. Shelves rattled, objects clattering against one another. And then they moved. Not just the objects. The shelves themselves shifted. Like they were alive, like the room itself was rearranging its bones. The ground trembled under our feet, and a deep, guttural groan echoed through the chamber, as if the very walls were waking up. Ginny grabbed my arm. We need to get out of here. No argument there. We turned back toward where the door had been, but the smooth stone wall stared back at us, blank and unyielding. The whispering was everywhere now, growing louder, faster, desperate. And then, through the chaos of the shifting room, I heard something else. Laughter. Not mocking. Not cruel. But unmistakable. I turned sharply, just in time to see a new opening appear in the far wall. And through it stumbled Fred and George Weasley. They skidded to a halt, their wands drawn, eyes wide with astonishment. Well, Fred breathed, glancing around at the shifting chamber. This is new. George shot us a look. What did you two do? Ginny threw up her hands. Oh, so now it's our fault? The ground beneath us trembled again, cutting off any further argument. The shelves were closing in, rearranging themselves, and I had the sinking feeling that if we didn't move now, we'd be trapped in this living labyrinth forever. Fred snapped into action first. Right, time to go. He reached into his pocket and pulled out what looked like a small metal ball. George grinned. We like to call this the getaway grenade. I didn't even have time to question it before Fred lobbed it toward the shifting shelves. The moment it hit the ground, bang! A shockwave of dazzling golden sparks exploded outward, temporarily freezing everything in place. The shelves stopped moving. The whispering cut off. Even the runes on the walls dimmed. George whooped. It works. Merlin's socks, it actually works. Ginny didn't wait for further celebration. Let's move. We sprinted toward the opening Fred and George had come through. It was a narrow passage, barely wide enough for all of us to fit, but the moment we crossed the threshold, the chamber behind us sealed shut. The whispers cut off instantly. Silence. All of us stood there, breathing hard. The only sound was the distant drip of water from somewhere deeper in the tunnels. Ginny turned to her brothers, hands on her hips. What are you two doing here? Fred grinned, unfazed. Heard you were up to something. Figured we'd tag along. George nodded. And good thing we did, too. You two were about 5 seconds away from being eaten by that room. I blinked. That room was alive? Fred shrugged. Seemed like it. Probably some kind of magical defense system. Old enchantments have a nasty habit of taking on mind of their own. Ginny exhaled sharply. Great. So we barely escaped an evil library. I looked back at the now sealed entrance. but we never saw what was under that cloth. A moment of silence passed. Then Fred grinned. Guess that means we'll have to go back. Ginny groaned. Are you serious? But even as she said it, I could see the same flicker of curiosity in her eyes that I felt in my chest. Because despite the danger, despite the terror of that room, we hadn't even scratched the surface of what lay hidden beneath Hogwarts. And I, for one, wasn't done searching. The silence in the tunnel stretched between us, thick and heavy. The only sound was our breathing, still ragged from our escape. The walls around us were different from the chamber we had just fled, not smooth, ancient stone, but rough, uneven rock, as if this passage had been carved in secret, away from the rest of the castle's magic. I reached out, running my fingers over the damp surface. This tunnel, it feels older than the chamber. Fred raised an eyebrow. Older than the ancient room full of cursed artifacts? That's comforting. Ginny shot him a glare, then turned back to me. Where do you think it leads? That was the real question. The tunnel stretched ahead, shrouded in darkness, the air colder the further in we went. Something about it made my skin crawl, not like the whispering artifacts, but something deeper, more unnatural. George sighed. Well, there's only one way to find out. He took a step forward, and before we could react, click. The moment his foot touched the ground, a groaning sound rumbled through the passage. Not from ahead of us, but from behind. I turned sharply. The stone wall where we had entered was closing. Move! I shouted. We sprinted forward just as the tunnel sealed itself behind us, plunging us into an eerie silence once more. George let out a slow breath. All right, that was very trap-like. Fred frowned. Yeah, I was hoping this would be more of an adventure and less of a slowly dying in a collapsing tunnel situation. Ginny ignored them, already raising her wand. Lumos. A soft glow illuminated the passage, casting long shadows along the jagged walls. The tunnel was narrower here, forcing us to walk in a single file. The air smelled damp, like earth that had been undisturbed for centuries. I turned to Ginny. What's on the map? She unrolled the enchanted parchment, squinting at the ink. But instead of the usual crisp, shifting pathways, the section we were in was blank. That's not right, she muttered, tapping the page with her wand. This should be showing something. Fred leaned over her shoulder. So, we're off the grid? George smirked. That's one way to put it. The realization sent a shiver down my spine. If the map didn't recognize this tunnel, that meant one of two things. It was either so well hidden that even the marauders hadn't known about it, or it wasn't meant to exist at all. I swallowed. Let's keep moving. We pressed forward, the tunnel sloping downward. The deeper we went, the heavier the air became. Every step sent echoes bouncing through the passage, like something was falling just out of sight. Then the whispers started. Not like the ones in the artifact chamber. These weren't layered, ancient voices. These were closer. I froze. Did you hear that? Ginny stiffened beside me. Yeah. The Weasley twins fell silent, their usual light-hearted energy replaced with something sharper, alert. Fred raised his wand. If it's a ghost, now's the time to start rattling your chains. The whispering didn't stop. It grew closer. I turned sharply, shining my light down the tunnel behind us. Nothing. But the whispers remained, curling around us like unseen hands. George muttered, "I really hate this." And then, the floor vanished beneath us. For a single, heart-stopping second, there was nothing. No ground, no stability, just the sensation of falling into empty air. My stomach lurched, my breath caught in my throat, and then, slam, we hit the ground hard. Dust exploded around me, filling my lungs, and I coughed violently. My head spun, my arms aching from the impact. Somewhere to my right, I heard Fred groan. Right. Okay. So we fell. That's new. I forced myself to sit up, blinking rapidly to clear my vision. The glow of our wands flickered in the dust, revealing where we had landed. It was a cavern. The tunnel had led us here, like a throat swallowing us whole. The walls stretched high above us, glistening with moisture, the air heavy with the scent of earth and something old. Large, jagged stones jutted from the floor like broken teeth. Ginny pushed herself up beside me, wincing. "Is everyone all right?" George groaned. "Physically? Yes. Emotionally? Absolutely not." Fred dusted himself off. "Where are we?" I didn't have an answer. But then I saw it. At the far end of the cavern, partially buried beneath layers of rock, was a door. Not just any door, this one was different. It was massive, almost twice the height of a regular door, carved from dark, ancient wood reinforced with iron. Symbols were burned into the surface, twisting and curling in patterns I didn't recognize. The edges were rimmed with silver, and in the center, embedded deep within the wood, was a handle shaped like a serpent's head. Ginny followed my gaze. "That's it." I barely heard her. I was already moving toward it. Fred grabbed my arm. "Whoa, hold up. Did we not just get chased, nearly crushed, and then dropped into a giant hole? Maybe let's think before touching the obviously cursed door?" I hesitated. He had a point. But the door, it called to me. Like the whispering artifacts, like the pedestal in the chamber above, this wasn't just an ordinary barrier. It was something else. Something powerful. Ginny stepped forward, frowning. "There's no keyhole." George ran his fingers over the carvings. "No hinges, either." Fred crossed his arms. "Great. So, do we knock?" Before anyone could answer, the serpent handle moved. A hiss echoed through the cavern as the silver snake's eyes lit up, glowing with an eerie, molten light. The carved mouth slowly creaked open, and from it came a voice, low, slithering, and impossibly old. "Who seeks the door of forgotten magic?" The cavern seemed to pulse, the very air humming with power. None of us spoke. The snake's glowing eyes flickered. "Answer." Ginny squared her shoulders. "We do." A pause. Then, the entire door began to shake. The carvings twisted, reshaping themselves, the symbols moving across the surface like living ink. Dust rained from the ceiling as the cavern trembled. And then, the door started to open. Not like a normal door. Not outward or inward. It split apart in the middle, stone and wood unraveling like the jaws of a beast. A blinding golden light poured through the widening gap, casting shadows across the cavern walls. I raised a hand to shield my eyes, my heart pounding. Beyond that door was something we were never meant to find. But we had. And now, there was no turning back. The light pouring from the doorway was almost blinding, so bright it turned everything else into shadow. I squinted, my heart pounding as the cavern around us seemed to shrink beneath its radiance. The ancient door continued to unravel, splitting apart like the jaws of some unseen beast, revealing whatever lay beyond. Ginny took a slow step forward, wand raised. "I don't like this." Fred let out a low whistle. "Yeah, well, I didn't like the screaming artifacts either, but here we are." George elbowed him. "That's the spirit. Just embrace the deeply cursed nature of whatever we're about to walk into." Despite the jokes, I could hear the tension in their voices. We all felt it. This was not just another secret passage in Hogwarts. This was something ancient, something hidden for a reason. But we had come too far to turn back now. I took the first step across the threshold. The second I did, the golden light shifted, dimming as if acknowledging my presence. The others followed, and as soon as the last of us crossed, the door sealed shut behind us with a deep, echoing thud. There was no going back. I turned, heart hammering in my chest, to see where we had ended up. It was a room. But it wasn't like any room I had ever seen before. The walls stretched endlessly, curving into an impossible dome, covered from floor to ceiling in mirrors. Hundreds of them, in different shapes and sizes, some cracked, others pristine, all arranged in erratic, unnatural patterns. They reflected us back in distorted, fractured ways, stretched too tall, shrunk too small, faces blurred, eyes missing. But the worst part? Some of the mirrors didn't show us at all. Some of them showed other things. I swallowed hard. "What is this place?" Ginny stepped beside me, her face pale. "A chamber of mirrors?" Fred frowned. "Looks more like a chamber of nightmares." George reached out toward one of the larger mirrors, his fingers hovering over the glass. "These aren't normal reflections." I knew he was right. The images in some of the mirrors weren't showing what was in the room at all. In one, Hogwarts' Great Hall was filled with people dressed in ancient wizarding robes. In another, the Gryffindor common room was empty and covered in dust, as if abandoned for 100 years. In another, a shadowy figure stood at the entrance of what looked like the Room of Requirement, watching us. And then, the mirrors whispered. A sharp, hissing sound echoed from every direction. It wasn't voices. It was the sound of breathing. I turned sharply, my pulse spiking. "Did you hear that?" Ginny nodded, gripping her wand tighter. "Definitely." Fred and George had gone deadly silent. Their usual smirks were gone. And then, one of the mirrors moved. Not a reflection. The mirror itself. It shifted forward, tilting at an unnatural angle, as if something on the other side was trying to push through. A long, pale hand pressed against the glass. I staggered back. That's... The mirror cracked beneath the pressure. Ginny shouted, "Move!" The hand burst through the glass, sending razor-sharp shards flying. We dived aside as the mirror shattered completely, and something stepped out. A figure. tall, robed, and faceless. It had no features, no eyes, no mouth, just smooth, pale skin where a face should be. Its robes billowed as if caught in a wind we couldn't feel. And then it spoke. "You do not belong here." The voice was hollow, distant, like it wasn't speaking in the room but inside my mind. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Ginny broke the silence. "Who are you?" The faceless figure tilted its head. "I am the keeper of the room that sees." Fred muttered, "Okay, that's horrifying." George swallowed. "What does that mean?" The keeper raised a hand, and every single mirror in the room shifted at once. The reflections inside them flickered, changing, showing different moments, different places. But then, one of them caught my eye. It was me. But not me. The reflection was dressed in dark robes, eyes burning with something unnatural. In this reflection, I stood alone, wand raised, surrounded by darkness. I took a step closer before I could stop myself. The keeper spoke again. "The room sees what was, what is, and what could be." Ginny grabbed my arm. "We need to get out of here." I shook my head. "Wait, what does that mean?" The keeper turned toward me. I couldn't see its eyes, but I felt its gaze like a weight. The mirrors show possibilities. Paths that may come, paths that may not. The magic of this place is woven into time itself. Fred exhaled sharply. Brilliant. So we're trapped in a room that shows the past, present, and future all at once. That's not terrifying at all. The keeper took a step forward. "You must leave." The moment it said that, the room shifted again. The mirrors started to shake, the images inside them distorting. The reflections blurred and stretched, shapes moving within the glass. And then, one by one, the mirrors began to break. Ginny cursed. "It's collapsing." George shouted, "Where's the exit?" The keeper raised both hands, and suddenly, one of the mirrors at the far end of the room began to glow. A way out. But between us and that mirror, the other reflections were moving, stepping out of their shattered prisons. Figures. Shadows of ourselves. There was no time to think. I grabbed Ginny's hand and ran. The Weasley twins were right beside us as the room collapsed, mirrors exploding into dust and shards, reflections reaching for us with clawed hands. The exit was just ahead. The keeper watched us go, but made no move to stop us. We dove into the glowing mirror. And then, everything went dark. I felt weightless, as if falling through space itself. The whispers of the mirrors still rang in my ears, echoes of things I couldn't understand. And then, we hit the ground. Hard. I gasped, blinking against the dim, flickering light. We were somewhere new. The keeper was gone. The mirrors were gone. But we were still trapped. And we were not alone. My lungs burned as I gasped for breath. The weightlessness was gone, replaced by solid, freezing stone beneath me. My body ached from the impact, but there was no time to dwell on it. My head spun as I forced myself up, my heartbeat still hammering from our escape. Ginny groaned beside me, clutching her arm where she had landed. Fred and George were sprawled nearby, shaking dust from their robes. The room around us was dim, barely illuminated by the flickering blue torches lining the walls. Their eerie glow cast shifting shadows across the ancient stonework. We were no longer in the room that sees. We had landed somewhere deeper. George coughed, sitting up. Right. So, to recap, we just got chased out of a cursed mirror room by nightmare versions of ourselves, and now we're in. Fred looked around, eyes narrowing. A dungeon? Ginny pulled herself up, wincing. No. This isn't a dungeon. Look at the walls. I turned. She was right. The stonework here was different. The walls were lined with strange carvings, twisting in patterns that pulsed faintly as if alive. The shapes were words, not in any language I recognized, but there was something deeply unsettling about them. And then I saw them. The faces. Etched into the stone, hidden between the shifting carvings, were dozens, no, hundreds, of faces. Some screaming, some whispering, their expressions frozen in time, their mouths open as if mid-sentence. Fred took a step back. Okay. This is officially worse than the mirror room. George muttered, for once, I agree. I swallowed hard. The faces were watching us. I could feel it. Ginny shuddered. What is this place? The answer came from nowhere. A voice, low, hollow, and surrounding us from all sides, spoke. The chamber of echoes. I turned sharply. No one was there. The words had come from the walls themselves. Fred exhaled. Fantastic. Talking walls. Just what we needed. Ginny ignored him, gripping her wand. Who are you? Another whisper. No, many whispers, overlapping. We are the lost. The forgotten. The voices of those who came before. A chill ran down my spine. Before what? For a moment, silence. Then, the walls breathed. Not physically. Not in the way lungs expand and contract. But the air shifted, and suddenly, it felt as though the very chamber was alive. And then, the whispers turned into screams. The faces twisted, their mouths stretching unnaturally wide, their eyes hollow and endless. The room shook, and an unnatural howl filled the space, as if something had been woken up. Ginny grabbed my arm. Run. We sprinted. The chamber was a maze, corridors twisting and turning without reason. The carvings blurred as we moved, the torches flickering violently as if reacting to our presence. The further we ran, the louder the whispers became, their voices overlapping until they formed a singular, deafening roar. Then, the floor shifted beneath us. Fred cursed. Not again. The stone cracked, and suddenly we were falling again. Only this time, it wasn't into another chamber. It was into darkness. A tunnel opened beneath our feet, and for a terrifying moment, there was nothing, no sound, no sensation except the rush of air. Then, we hit water. The impact was brutal, cold stealing the breath from my lungs as I plunged beneath the surface. I kicked frantically, fighting my way up, breaking through with a desperate gasp. Ginny surfaced beside me, coughing violently. Fred and George weren't far, both sputtering as they treaded water. We were in an underground lake. The cavern stretched around us, the water reflecting faint, green-tinged light from the ceiling. The air was thick with moisture, the sound of dripping echoing eerily. The walls here were smoother, unnatural, like they had been carved not by time, but by magic. And then we heard it. The sound of something moving beneath the water. I turned sharply, heart hammering. The surface rippled, something shifting just below. Ginny whispered, "Tell me that was one of you." No one answered. Then, from the shadows of the cavern, a shape emerged. Long serpentine. My blood turned to ice. Eyes, glowing yellow eyes, opened in the darkness, fixing on us. And then, the hissing began. It wasn't parcel tongue. It was something older, deeper, a sound that vibrated in my bones. The creature rose from the water, its body impossibly massive, coils shifting in the darkness. A serpent. But not the basilisk. No, this was something else. Something older. Something that had been waiting. George whispered, "That's a very big snake." Fred hissed, "Understatement of the year, mate." Ginny was frozen, staring at it, her face pale. I barely had time to process what was happening before the serpent struck. Water exploded around us as it lunged. We dove in different directions, barely avoiding its massive jaws as they snapped shut where we had just been. The impact sent waves crashing, pushing me underwater again. I kicked hard, struggling back to the surface, gasping for air. Fred and George were swimming toward a rocky outcrop, scrambling to get onto solid ground. Ginny grabbed my hand. "Go!" We swam as fast as we could, my limbs burning with exhaustion. The serpent circled, its massive coils moving through the water with terrifying speed. It was playing with us. We reached the rocks, Fred pulling Ginny up first, then George grabbing my arm. I barely made it before the serpent lunged again, slamming into the ledge with a force that made the entire cavern shake. The rock beneath us cracked. Ginny raised her wand. Stupefy. The spell struck the serpent's scales, but it barely reacted. The magic seemed to splash off its body, useless. George muttered, "Well, that's not good." The serpent hissed, its massive head hovering just beyond the ledge, watching us. And then, it spoke. Not in parcel tongue. Not in English. But in a voice that reverberated through our minds. "You seek what is forbidden." The chamber trembled. The water rippled. And I realized, with cold, absolute certainty, this was not just a guardian. This was something far worse. Something that had been left behind to ensure no one ever left this place alive. And we had just made it very, very angry. The cavern trembled as the serpent loomed over us, its massive body coiling through the water like liquid darkness. Its glowing yellow eyes burned with something ancient, something beyond rage or hunger. This was not a mere creature. It was something older, something left here for a reason. Fred, panting, muttered, "Okay." "So, anyone have a brilliant plan that doesn't involve getting eaten horribly?" George grimaced. "Not unless we have a basilisk-slaying sword hidden in our pockets." Ginny's grip on her wand tightened. "It's intelligent. It spoke to us. Maybe we can reason with it." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. That thing doesn't look like it wants a friendly chat. The serpent's head lowered, its long forked tongue flicking out. Its voice rippled through the air, not heard with our ears, but felt in our bones. You do not belong here. I forced myself to stand tall, even though every part of me screamed to run. We didn't come here to disturb anything. You came seeking the forbidden. Its massive coils tightened, sending waves rippling through the underground lake. The water lapped violently against the rocks beneath us, making it clear that one wrong move could send us tumbling back into the depths. Fred whispered, "Tell it we're just lost students who stumbled in here by accident." The serpent let out a low, echoing hiss, as if hearing every word. Lies. The walls of the cavern shifted, the stone seemingly breathing, just as the walls in the Chamber of Echoes had. This entire place wasn't just hiding something, it was alive. Ginny took a step forward, lifting her chin. "Then tell us what this place is. If we don't belong here, why did it let us in?" The serpent's eyes narrowed. For a long, terrible moment, it simply stared at her. Then, the cavern changed. The blue torchlight dimmed until we were swallowed by an unnatural darkness. A heavy pressure filled the air, pressing against our chests. And then, as if the stone itself had become glass, the cavern's walls shifted, and we were no longer standing on a rocky ledge. The water was gone. The serpent was gone. We were standing in a great stone hall. The air felt old. Dust swirled through shafts of dim, golden light that streamed from unseen windows high above. The ceiling stretched endlessly into shadow. Lining the walls were statues, massive, hooded figures standing in eerie silence, their faces hidden. A chill ran through me. We were being watched. Ginny whispered, "Where are we?" Before any of us could answer, a voice, deeper, colder than the serpent's, echoed from the darkness. "The trial has begun." Something moved. The statues weren't statues. They were stepping forward. Their cloaks shifted, stone turning to fabric, their shadowed faces still hidden beneath their hoods. There were 6 of them, each standing impossibly tall, their presence unnatural, not quite human, not quite something else. George muttered, "I am deeply regretting this entire adventure." Fred whispered back, "Welcome to the club." I gripped my wand tightly, forcing my voice not to shake. "What trial?" The figure in the center, the tallest of them all, spoke without moving its mouth. "The trial of worth. None may pass unless they prove themselves." The torches along the walls flared, revealing a massive stone door at the far end of the hall. Carved into it were symbols, the same twisting markings we had seen in the Chamber of Echoes. The door pulsed faintly, as if alive. Ginny exhaled. "We have to pass this trial to get out, don't we?" The central figure lifted a long, robed arm, and in a voice like cracking ice, it declared, "Only those who endure may continue." The other 5 figures raised their hands, and suddenly, the floor beneath us vanished. We were falling again. The world twisted. For a split second, I saw flashes of Hogwarts, of the Gryffindor common room, of the Great Hall. I heard laughter, screams, whispers. And then, I landed in complete silence. I gasped, feeling solid ground beneath me. But the others were gone. I spun around. Fred? George? Ginny? Nothing. I was alone. I stood in a small, circular chamber, the stone walls stretching endlessly above me. A single door stood ahead, made of dark metal, its surface covered in runes. A voice whispered from nowhere, "Face yourself." The door swung open. I stepped inside, and I froze, because standing there, staring back at me, was me. But not me. The other me was dressed in black robes, his wand flickering with dark energy. His face was the same, but his eyes were hollow, like something had been drained from within. He tilted his head, studying me like a predator would study prey. He smirked. "So, this is who I could have been." My pulse pounded. "You're not real." The reflection shrugged. "Neither is fate. But here we are." I raised my wand. "What is this?" He mirrored the movement. "A test. A warning. A chance." The voice from before whispered again, "Defeat your shadow." Before I could react, the other me attacked. A bolt of red light shot toward me. I barely deflected it in time. My own curse struck the stone wall, sending sparks flying. The air shook with magic as we clashed, every spell I cast being mirrored back at me. But he was stronger, faster, as if he had no hesitation, no restraint. He lunged, one aimed directly at my chest. I dodged, rolling to the side as his next curse blasted the stone where I had just been standing. The heat of it scorched my skin. "You're holding back," he sneered. "You always hold back." I gritted my teeth. "Because I have something to fight for." His smirk vanished. I raised my wand. "And you? You're just an echo." Before he could move, I shouted, "Expelliarmus." The spell slammed into him. The other me was yanked backward, his wand flying from his grip. He let out a silent scream as he dissolved into shadows, vanishing like mist. The voice whispered one last time, "You have passed." The chamber vanished. I gasped, and found myself back in the great stone hall. Ginny, Fred, and George stood nearby, all panting, their faces pale. They had been through their own trials. The cloaked figures were gone. The massive stone door creaked open. Beyond it, a dim passage stretched forward. We had passed. But we weren't safe yet, because something still waited ahead. The stone door groaned open, revealing a long, shadowed corridor that pulsed with eerie blue light. The air beyond it was thick, heavy, almost buzzing with ancient magic. It felt like stepping through a barrier into a place where time itself had fractured, where reality was only barely holding together. We had passed the trial of worth, but something told me our greatest challenge was still ahead. Fred wiped sweat from his forehead. "Right. So, are we sure we actually want to see what's behind door number death?" George sighed. "I mean, we've come this far. Can't exactly turn back now." Ginny's grip tightened around her wand. "Let's finish this." I took a deep breath and stepped forward. The others followed close behind as we entered the passage. With every step, the walls shifted, carvings twisting into new symbols, as if the room was reacting to us. The further we went, the colder the air became, and a deep, rhythmic hum filled the space, like the heartbeat of something enormous. Then, the corridor ended. We stepped into a vast, circular chamber, larger than any room I had seen at Hogwarts, larger even than the Great Hall. The ceiling disappeared into swirling shadows, while the walls were lined with floating, ancient artifacts suspended in midair. But at the center, at the very heart of the room, stood a pedestal, and on it rested a book. It was unlike any book I had ever seen. Bound in deep crimson leather, its cover pulsed faintly, as though it was breathing. Strange runes shimmered along its spine, shifting constantly, making it impossible to read. The air around it was alive with power, raw and untamed. Ginny inhaled sharply. The Book of Echoes. Fred blinked. Wait, you know what this is? She nodded slowly. I've read about it. It's a forbidden artifact, rumored to hold ancient, forgotten spells. The kind of magic that was erased from history because it was too dangerous. George took a step back. And we're just standing in front of it? With no traps? No giant snake attacking us? For a moment, none of us moved. The book sat there, silent, waiting. That's when I felt it. A presence. Not a sound, not a movement, but something watching. Then, the voice, that same voice from the trial, spoke one last time, its tone impossibly ancient. One of you must claim the burden. I shuddered. Burden? The voice continued, filling the chamber like rolling thunder. The knowledge within is not meant for the unworthy. One must take it, and in doing so, be marked forever. The others stiffened. Fred exhaled sharply. So, just to be clear, whoever touches this thing gets permanently cursed with a book full of terrifying magic? Ginny whispered, it's not just about taking it. It's about controlling it. If someone unworthy tries, the book will destroy them. A cold weight settled in my stomach. This had been the true test all along. Not the chamber. Not the serpent. Not the trials. It was this choice. Someone had to claim the book, but at what cost? Silence stretched between us. No one moved. Then, I stepped forward. Ginny grabbed my arm. Wait. I looked at her, then at Fred and George. We didn't come all this way to leave empty-handed. My voice was steady, but inside, my heart pounded. If someone has to do it, I will. Fred and George exchanged a look. George muttered, Merlin's beard, he's actually doing it. I took another step. Then another. The magic in the air tightened. The moment I was close enough, the book reacted, its runes flared, and the chamber shook. A gust of energy swirled around me, lifting dust and debris, making my robes whip violently. I reached out. My fingers brushed the cover. Pain. It seared through me, not just in my skin, but in my mind. Visions, flashes of ancient spells, of powerful magic being cast and unmade, of figures lost to time who had held this knowledge before me. Then, the book calmed. The energy surrounding it died down, and the chamber grew still. I had passed. I lifted the book, cradling its heavy weight in my arms. The moment I did, a single rune on the cover burned itself into my palm, marking me permanently. It didn't hurt, But I knew, deep down, that I had been changed. The others rushed forward. Ginny's eyes were wide with relief. "You did it." Fred grinned. "Well, we should probably leave before something else tries to eat us." George nodded. "Agreed. Let's get out of here." As if listening, the chamber responded. The walls rippled, and a passage opened, leading us back, not to the serpent's lair, but straight to the entrance we had first come through. We ran. The magic of the chamber seemed to fade behind us, the pulsing runes dimming, the air growing still. We burst through the hidden door, stumbling back into the quiet corridors of Hogwarts. For a long moment, none of us spoke. We were back. The school was just as we had left it, warm candlelight flickering through the halls, the distant hum of students going about their nights. As if nothing had happened. As if we hadn't just stolen a forbidden book from an ancient, hidden chamber beneath the castle. Fred let out a breathless laugh. "I can't believe we actually survived that." George clapped me on the back. "And look at you, book bearer extraordinaire. Do you feel powerful? Can you summon lightning now?" I smirked. "I feel like I need a really long nap." Ginny shook her head, but there was a small smile on her lips. We did it. We had found the hidden chamber. We had faced its trials, its guardian, its secrets, and we had come out alive. But as I glanced down at the book in my hands, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Because knowledge this dangerous never stays hidden forever. And I had just taken something that would change my life forever. The end. As the dust settles and the echoes of ancient magic fade, the halls of Hogwarts return to their quiet slumber. The hidden chamber, once a secret lost to time, now rests once more in silence, its mysteries uncovered, yet its power still lingering in the shadows. The journey was perilous, the trials were great, but in the end, courage prevailed. And though the night may be still, the whispers of adventure remain, waiting for the next soul brave enough to seek the unknown. Now, let the warmth of this story stay with you as you drift into rest. The castle sleeps, the stars shine above, and the magic of dreams carries you into the night.